welcome everyone. We're going to be talking about how to build a six-figure Section 8 real estate portfolio. I'm your host, Saad Dar. I'm very excited to have Cody Brown here. So I think some of you know me already, but I lead business development and partnerships and a couple other functions at Baselane. I'm also a real estate investor. Cody, would you like to say a quick hello and do a quick intro for everybody?
So Cody Brown, real estate investor in my spare time for the most part, but I own and manage a real estate business. I'm also the director of field HRBPs for a heavy equipment rental company called Equipment Share by day. Varied background though. I spent time at Amazon and Microsoft in the past in different leadership roles for them too. But investing is what I do for fun, and I enjoy it and have a passion around that side. So I'm excited to talk to people about it, and I have a very specific area that I focus on in the investments that we do.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited to have you here today. And so just housekeeping. So this is being recorded. And for anybody that is watching on YouTube, please help us out. Give us a like and a subscribe. And today we're going to be jumping right into learning more about Cody's experience and how he's built his real estate portfolio, focusing in on Section 8. Before we do that, for some of our newcomers, we just wanted to quickly highlight a little bit about Baselane. If you haven't heard about Baselane and you're just coming in for the first time, Baselane is the #1 banking platform for real estate investors. It is banking, online rent collection, bookkeeping, and much more to help you run your real estate business. We allow you to really, easily analyze your cash flows by setting up things like virtual accounts and cards and automated bookkeeping. So check out Baselane, join 40,000 landlords that trust Baselane with their banking, rent collection, and bookkeeping. That is baselane.com. Awesome. So that is out of the way, and we can now focus in on getting to know Cody. And so before we do that, and while we kind of start with the intro, we do want to get a quick poll together so we understand who is in the audience. And let me just launch that right now so we can get some input from everybody. So please take a look. There's a couple of questions in there. Help us out and answer those questions, and hopefully that'll give you an idea, Cody, of who's listening. So you've got some input. If you have any questions, you can feel free to type them into the chat. We'll do our best to address those, but we're going to focus more on just getting to know Cody. So we'll try to do a Q&A at the end when we have about 10 minutes left, if that works for everybody. If we can answer your questions offline, we'll do that. Awesome. So without further ado, Cody, the people are answering the questions, and I want to quickly cover that so you have an idea of who is listening to us today. And let's see. So how many rental properties do you currently own? So we have quite a good mix. A lot of folks are in the 1 to 3 unit range. Small percentage, under 5%, 0. 4 to 10 seems to be the most popular. So a lot of folks are 10
great.
unit, 25%. And then what types of rentals are in your portfolio? So almost everybody has midterm, long-term, and about 8% short-term. Some folks are doing fix and flips, and about 13% doing owner-occupied multifamily, about 7% doing commercial. So it gives you a mix.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's a really great mix of people, right? Every background possible.
Yeah, and then another very important question is, have you invested in Section 8 before? So this is a good one. So the first option was, yes, I want to see if I'm missing anything and learn more, 32%.
Okay.
60% said I want to start soon and need guidance. So the majority of people are wanting to get into it and they want to figure out how. And a small percentage, about 5%, said they've never heard of Section 8. So that is another
That's all right. You will by the end of the day, right? Like you will at least know more.
Yeah.
You will definitely know more than I probably did for the first 6 months by the end of our conversation today, I hope, because I'm still learning all the time, which is great. Love that side of it.
Absolutely. So can you just start, let's start by just learning a little bit more about you. So can you tell us about your journey into real estate investing and what drew you to get into Section 8 in the first place?
Yeah, so I think I actually ended up in like low income housing because accidentally. I don't know anyone who said the first rental property they ever want to buy was going to be a low income housing rental. So I found it just because I had put together that spreadsheet that I think everybody has of their hopes and dreams of what they want to do from a real estate investing perspective. And it was calculated based off single family rentals because in my mind, apartments were the most complicated thing on the planet. I'd never want to deal with that. And then it turned out that whenever I was shopping for places to look at, my wife and I were looking for our first property, we found a duplex. And When I looked at the duplex, it was a good deal. It worked out, and it was a low income housing duplex. And we had some opportunities to where we could market that either to Section 8 or not. But what I found out is that Section 8 in our town actually paid a better market rate than what I was going to get for the same unit. I just didn't meet all the qualifications they might have yet due to some different standards they have around room development in my area, right? So I started learning about that. And then a couple months later, we picked up a 4 unit building. And I learned really quickly that, oh, wow, because my units are qualified, I can work through that process with the local housing authority. I'm able to get tenants that they have a waiting list for. They have a tremendous amount of demand. It solves a lot of that problem for me. And I'm going to get a portion of that rent in what's a lot of times called guaranteed. But, a portion of that rent is going to be paid for by the local housing authority. I'm going to get to help out a community that is struggling because a lot of other landlords didn't want to work with Section 8 tenants. And then, it became just a kind of a cascading thing to where, well, we figured out that, hey, we wanted to operate in this space. We like that we can impact that community.
Yeah.
And if we do that really well, it's good for my local community. And I'm fortunate I get to invest in my hometown area. It's the space we specifically targeted because it worked really well for our models and it had low barriers to entry. And that mattered a lot for me at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, what can you tell us a little bit about what does your current portfolio look like? And
Yeah.
what role does Section 8 play in that? What's the mix look like?
Yeah, so right now we have 77 units, all within a 25-mile radius of one another. So all of that is multifamily, except for one single-family home. I did my first BRRRR deal, so I'm a person who finds a model, I stick to my model, and I try to get really good at one thing. I had a deal that was for a single-family home BRRRR this spring that I couldn't pass up, so my wife and I did our first BRRRR deal that way. Absolutely love it. About 50% of my current rentals are working with a local housing authority or Section 8 of some type. Sometimes it's also veterans associations in the area too that might pay housing at the same time that's not directly Section 8 maybe. But about 50%, I always tell everyone if I could operate at 100%, I would, but I try to also be really fair in our housing practices to where if I have a qualified applicant who comes to me first before I have a tenant with a housing voucher come to me, we try to honor that process, that the first tenant that qualifies, that meets all the standards that would pass our background screening, we try to make sure that we give them first privilege. So while I may say that my life's even easier if I have a housing authority relationship that's existing there, we try to make sure that we honor that if we have another tenant who wants to come in who's not Section 8 supported at the time.
Got it. So
We
I
do
know.
have, oh, sorry. No, go ahead. But we have another 16 units under contract currently that all fit the same model. And we have another single family home. Those are all multifamily. We have another single family home that we should be closing on Monday as well too. That it'll be one that's not Section 8, but it makes a lot of sense if we ever do want to turn it that way.
Amazing. So 77 units, mostly multifamily, about 50% is Section 8, and the rest is more traditional long-term type of rental.
Yeah. Yeah, so that they flow back and forth. Your Section 8 tenants too, a lot of times they're very long standing. It just so happens that we've been able to retain tenants really well. Our great tenants that were in buildings when we bought them, we try our best to retain them, right? They're great people. We do step up programs if the rent rate's not right when we acquire, and we try to help them get to the rate we need to be at, but we try to be considerate at the same time. A lot of those tenants may not have been, Section 8 supported tenants at that time. So we've retained a lot of those great tenants. The other tenants we put in place are frequently Section 8 just because we work so well with the local housing authorities.
That's amazing. So I want to talk about all of that. But before we do, I do want to take a step back and just maybe define. I know there's about 70% of people that never heard of Section 8. So for our listeners who might not be familiar, can you explain what Section 8 housing is and how does it actually work from the tenant side? How do you qualify?
Yeah.
What type of profiles are coming into Section 8 versus not? And then I think the next question related to that is, what are the main benefits, the pros of Section 8 versus some of the challenges that you might have encountered? So that we'll get to that second, but I just want to give you a visibility into where that's at.
Yeah. So let's talk. I'm not going to get into specifics about the exact percentage of income or anything like that makes someone qualify. But if you think about it, Section 8, or lack of better terms, I like to look at it as just low-income housing supportive programs, right? Because Section 8 can sometimes have a connotation, which I don't know why. It's a great program for people who need it, but it's a government assistance program that primarily focuses on low-income individuals and families who may need assistance to afford housing. It's managed normally by local housing authorities. Each of those can be unique. We'll dive into some of those nuances later on, I think, in this call. But so often what might happen, and what happens in our case with the housing authorities we work with, our tenants receive a portion of their rent paid by the local housing authority on a monthly basis. It's based on the need determined by that housing authority due to their gross income that they have for the year, and how that relates to the local poverty line and market rates for the actual market you sit in. And markets are unique, so depending on the area you work in, the market rates that might be paid can be very different. They are for us 20 miles apart. They can be very, very different for what the market rates for rent might be. And then the percentages someone might be responsible for are really dependent upon the individual or the family and the household size. And that drives how much they're going to pay of their own rent.
Got it. Super helpful. So this is, available in all states, and I think most cities, if not all cities in the US. And
yeah, generally it is available everywhere because it's a federal program that has localized state support too, right?
yeah,
And so, there are nuances to each of these, but you can normally find this fair market housing data on the HUD website that gives you that either by county, by zip code, or sometimes by many areas within certain metro markets if the area is large enough.
yeah. And today, for the listener, I did bring some stats from some research I was doing earlier. So this is, I think, a year old, but out of about 5 million households receiving housing assistance, 2.1 million households received housing vouchers. And this is from an article from bankrate.com. 3 million households rent residences in Section 8. Families that stay in Section 8 programs for an average of 6 years, which I want to talk to you about because you mentioned that already, and it seems like a really interesting thing to dig into. Most households consist of two members on average, and there's more stats out there, but just sharing some high level, idea of some of the profile of that type of a tenant. And so I have a lot of questions before talking about the benefits even of this. When you look at an investment property and you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I going after in terms of, the type of property and the mix, like the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and the location, because you're already doing Section 8 as part of your strategy, how are you looking for deals differently? Or like, what are the things you think about when you're looking for a deal and that you could put a Section 8 person into that, a family into that type of a unit?
I think a Section 8 is like a market data pool that you will have in markets that may not be. So like BRRRR is an example. Everybody knows BRRRR in this investing world, right? Everybody loves that you can get an estimated rental calculator on their website of what you might be able to rent it for. I'm not going to lie to you. The areas I work in, we don't have all that data and it doesn't really exist. And you can ask Zillow, but I think there are 5 Zillow listings total within 20 miles of where most of my rentals are. So you're not going to see a lot of rental listings that way. So the data isn't great. What's great about Section 8 is you can find out really fast by looking on the website, but then calling and partnering with your local housing authority. You can find out what demand looks like at different bedroom levels.
Okay.
They'll tell you what their wait lists look like right now for unfilled vouchers for in that area. So they'll tell you if they have a wait list for the voucher level for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 and 5. They'll tell you how many folks they have waiting. You'll know exactly what the rent rates are. You'll know if that includes utilities or not based off the market and the valuation they did in that process. Okay. You'll know if they've put a stipulation outside of the standard government because they needed to meet a market demand that was not able to be met locally based off the estimations they're given by the federal government. You'll know all those things just by, going in, being really friendly. I will say this too, because they don't get a lot of easy interactions at your local housing authority office and just looking to be there to help. It's a treasure trove of information that once you unlock, it can give you really good insight into, okay, well, maybe I need to be investing more in this space because there's really good demand and you just may never have known.
That's really good. So you just, let me just understand that a little bit. So you can call them, you can walk into the office and theoretically, before you even buy anything from an investment perspective, you'll know that this is the roster, this is the demand in this zip code or this area or this city.
Yeah, you can ask that information. Now, look, I will tell you that your individual experience with a housing authority will vary, right? Just like mine does with different housing authorities. It's always a little different. But I've never had someone not be willing to tell me, hey, where are you needing the most support right now? Where are you struggling to get houses filled? Where are you struggling to get apartments filled? What's the biggest gap you have to getting all these people you've given a voucher? They need a space to live, but they don't have space. Where do you have wait lists? And if
Right.
I ask that and they give us great information, it's actually helping feed our decisions. It helps me, work out the deals in the way I need them to work. And I can do really good math once I know, because I know what I'm going to get paid on that. And it's not going to be, I think I can market it at this rate. It's if I'm working with a housing authority, I know I'm going to get this rate. It's really simple. It doesn't mean they can't change it year over year because they refresh yearly, but it does mean too that like, hey, also they'll tell you too, sometimes they're paying a bonus for putting a new tenant in place. So housing authorities have that ability too. If you house a new tenant and you put someone new in because they have a wait list, sometimes they'll be paying a bonus in that area.
That's amazing. So based on that information, that knowledge that you got and the process you run, um, how does that influence your investment criteria in terms of, when you're looking at a deal and running your pro formas and trying to figure out if you're going to go pull the trigger on something? It sounds to me like you'll be very confident about your rent number because you already kind
Yeah.
of, what else does it impact? Like when you're looking at your pro forma, you want to pull the trigger on something, how do you analyze deals differently based on that?
Yeah, so here's an easy one. So we stuck with apartments. We started with a duplex, we went to a fourplex, then a 10 unit. We have a couple 10 units, some 12 unit ones, a 21 unit building. All those things happened. So why would I go back and buy a single family rental
Right.
whenever I've been doing that and it works, right? Well, I went back to that because I got a notice from my local housing authority that they were upping the rate, I think, by $250 for a 3 bedroom unit by comparison to what I would have gotten the year prior. And I found anomalies in the marketplace that said, hey, I can actually buy certain 3 bedroom units at a price point that's not that, maybe it was an extra 10% premium over what I was paying for a 2 bedroom unit. And suddenly that math made sense because of the premium they were going to be able to offer me. Now, some of this too is I'm banking whenever I look at this too, that I doubt that we're going to see large pullbacks whenever we look at that level of the market and
Yeah.
the rent rates that are out there. Because once you establish a base, which often is not that far from where your housing authority market rate rent is, I don't expect to dip a lot below that. I'd be surprised if we do that. But like if I see that anomaly, it gave me a whole new perspective. And that's actually fueled the most recent deal that we have under contract. It was a big deal to me, and it actually changed the financials significantly. That 4 out of the 16 unit were 3 bedroom units. Well, that meant that I knew automatically that deal was a lot more valuable. It's $1,000 immediately more on the rent roll than what I would have had if I baked them all in at 2 bedroom units as I was looking to buy this portfolio from someone. It
Right.
made a lot of sense suddenly that, okay, that's a pretty big number to add to my top line revenue. And for the majority, my costs aren't that different in operating a 2 bedroom apartment versus a 3 bedroom apartment. A little bit more on a house, but my costs don't differ greatly between maintenance
Right.
or my utility expenditures. So, I look at those things. If you'd like to know some of the individual stuff that we look at too, just let me know if you want me to dive deeper into how we look when we do an analysis on like utility costs, because I I personally pay all the utilities for my units.
That's maybe we can dig into an example because I think it'll be
Yeah.
helpful just for people to get like some real numbers, just a rough idea of what this looks like. So from what I understood so far, what you said is you actually went back and changed your investment strategy in terms of the type of assets you were buying.
Yeah,
Uh,
some. Yeah. I mean, there are some still fit. Yeah.
right. To fill some of that demand you found because you were going to have higher top line rents. It sounds like by 250 a door for the 3 bedrooms. And because your maintenance or your kind of like fixed costs almost, or even the variable costs are sort of similar on a percentage basis, that means your bottom line is going to be bigger. The
Yeah.
NOI on that is going to be higher. So what's an example of that? I mean, one of the questions actually in the group chat is where are you? What areas are we talking about in the country? If you can share that.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I won't give you individual town names because I don't think they matter in this end, and then everyone's going to ask me how to spell them anyway. But we operate in the Northeast Arkansas, Southeast Missouri area. We've expanded some now into looking more into like the western side of Tennessee. Mid South is what we call that area there, and that's primarily where we look. But I will tell you, housing, Section 8 housing works in some areas from a margin perspective, and other areas it doesn't. It's why you have to know that relationship and you have to know those rates really well in that market. It doesn't mean that no market, is possible, but you do have to really pay attention because you have to know what you're buying at the same time too, and make sure the financials work. But we operate in this Mid-South area right now.
That's helpful. So maybe let's dig into some of those numbers just one deal, maybe as an example, or one property even. That's okay.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about,
So
like, let's do one example. It sounds like you picked up some three bed, one or two baths. So what does it look like? Purchase price, right? What kind
so
of rent?
yeah, let's do the BRRRR deal because I think that's an easy one to start. It's nothing fancy, but it's also the one that you get kind of proud of when you don't have any money in it when you come back out of it, which is great. So
Yeah.
we picked up the BRRRR deal this spring. We bought it in January. It was a 3 bedroom, one bath house. So we do our own like inspections on a property too. Maybe that's a little, you have to, know your risk, but I know what I look for when I go to buy. So when I go to buy a property, I have a couple maintenance workers that work with me directly all the time. I care about the roof. I care about the HVAC. I care about the foundation, the electrical, and the plumbing. The cosmetics, I get a rough idea of what I'm going to have to do if I have to rehab a place. But outside of those things, I don't. I look at the big factors that are going to cause me catastrophic expense whenever I start. This one was, like I said, a brick and siding 3 bedroom home with one bath. I love one bathroom, especially for the low income housing rentals we do. I know it's luxurious and wonderful to have two bathrooms at all time. I love one because it's one bathroom that I have to repair. It's one
Right.
simple option, and it does not change the money you receive from the housing authority if it has two bathrooms. It only changes your costs.
That's it.
So, like,
They
it,
don't.
it is based off bedroom. It is based off bedroom.
Is that similar in other cities too, or do you think it's
I've never seen a city listed 4 bedroom, two bathroom rent. It says 4 bedroom rent.
hmm,
Maybe somebody else can tell me. I've just never, and I have 2 bedroom units and two baths with them too. I get no more money for that than I get on a 2 bedroom, one bath that is based off the bedroom count. So for me, if you ask me if I'm willing to buy a 4 bedroom, two bath house, I will pay less for that than I would pay for a 4 bedroom, one bath house personally,
that's a
because I
big
look at my maintenance costs
that's a big insight.
and
I hate those plumbing related issues.
it's the stuff that honestly, if you manage anything yourself too, it's the stuff that you hate hearing the most is anything plumbing related. I'd almost rather have to hear about a leak in a roof than I would about a plumbing issue at times because you never know what kind of situation you're going to find yourself in.
Okay,
But
so
with this, yeah, coming to the
you
3 bedroom house,
three bedroom, one bath, BRRRR deal. So what were like the numbers?
yeah, yeah. So we bought the house for roughly $39,000, which I know sounds insane to everyone on this call, but it was not in a flood zone, which is a big factor too. I look at before we ever make an offer, I make sure I understand flood zone or not flood zone. Depending on your market, that may be relevant, maybe not. But if you ever had to buy flood insurance, you'll not want to again because it's expensive. But it was, and I looked, and before we ever bought it, we did an assessment. We knew that the entire inside of the home needed a renovation. So we were going to have to do a kitchen remodel. We were going to have to do refinishing of all the hardwood floors. We were going to have to do a full bathroom remodel and plumbing work. And
Okay.
we also had to do electrical and a new HVAC unit. So this
Okay.
is quite a bit of capital that was going to go into
Well done.
this. But if I bought it, like I knew that because I knew and I worked with my local housing authority and they just refreshed their rent rates in January for 2023. I knew that once I renovated this unit, it was going to rent for $12.66 a month as long as I paid utilities. So if you
Okay.
look at that, I'm acquiring something at $39,000, but it's going to rent for $12.66 once I'm done with the renovation. Then I'm in pretty decent shape.
And what are your
Um,
utilities? Is it like $100 a month? What are we talking about?
on a unit like this, we did a brand new HVAC system, which helps a lot. We worked a little bit on making sure it was insulated well. Really, you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 to $175 a month on this property. It's pretty consistent there now too. I'd say that that's actually a place where we found margin consistently in the deals we do as well. That's why I pay utilities. I get a
That's
premium for paying utilities for my unit. I have about $200, and my average utility cost across all of our units is somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 160, depending on the month.
so you're
But
got it. So you're renting for 1266, utilities are included, and what was the renovation like for that one?
So the renovation, so this was an adventure. I was lucky that my maintenance crew was really handy in this. We had to hire out for our HVAC costs. That was about $7,000, which is not fun for anybody who's put in an HVAC unit recently. We also had to do all new ductwork, which was included in that cost.
Okay.
Um, we did a kitchen remodel where we chose to repaint the cabinets with all brand new stainless steel appliances in the units. We had to replace a few windows. We did a bathroom remodel where we replaced everything in the bathroom essentially, including the tub, vanities. We tried to replace it with nice amenities too, so it would feel nice when somebody walked in.
Okay.
And then we sanded the original hardwood floors and then resealed all of those to maintain them.
Okay. So
Um,
what was the all-in cost?
Total cost, we spent, I believe it was $32,000 because our all-in cost was right around 71 after we finished renovations.
Okay. So very efficient
So
renovation too. So 71K.
yeah, again, if you operate in some of these lower cost markets, you'll also find that you might have lower cost expenses when it comes to these companies that might do renovations for you too. We
Got it.
choose to work locally every time as well.
Got it.
We did, I will say, I did rent the sander and I sanded the floors myself for this one. So I don't know if I recommend that to anyone,
That's
but
what
I did that to save a little money.
I love it. So you blew past the 1% rule. I mean, 1266, you're all in at 71. How do you finance something like this?
So I'm a local bank addict. I don't work generally with any big banks, and there's not a problem with it if you do. I just find that local banks want to hold the loan, and it means something to me that I don't have to worry about my loan being sold. So I have two local banks that I work with really consistently. I've gotten a personal relationship built now with the loan officers at those banks. When I call, they answer. It means a lot, but I did it because I told them my business plan each and every time. I told them what my intentions were. I give them the financials up front of what they currently are and what I expect them to be. So when I went to go finance this, I went to one of the local banks that we work with. They did my very first deal. I said, hey, what are my terms right now? I didn't do this on a conventional, investment property loan. I did it with a commercial loan because it was the terms that I got that were actually really great for me. They offered me a 10 over 25, which if you're not sure about that, it's a 10-year lock with a 25-year amortization. They offered me that, if I recall, I think the interest rate was 8.25. So not great, y'all. This is just what it is in the commercial interest rate world, but it was very easy to close. I can close quickly with them too. And I did that at a 70% loan to value.
Okay.
We had a lot of confidence because we know the market well that the house would appraise at 110. It appraised at 110 before, and we expected that. We thought it could even appraise higher because we got told we might be able to sell it for even more than that.
Okay.
But it appraised at 110, which means that we took out a $77,000 mortgage. After expenses, we were able to put about $5,000 in our pocket after paying back everything that we owed in the renovation. So we end up in it for nothing, have a little money back in our pocket, and then all in with expenses. Now we cash flow somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 bucks a month on that deal. So
Amazing.
not nothing fancy, right? I'm not telling you I'm cash flowing $1,000, but to have no
This
money
is
in it,
realistic.
it
This
feels
is the
good.
reality
Yeah.
in that kind of a market. So just to summarize, all in at 71K, appraised at 110K, the rent is 1266. So you were able to cash out refi at 70% LTV, get all your money back plus another 5,000 in your pocket. You can reload and do that next deal. And
Yeah.
1266, I'm assuming, so you're clearing about 250 a month net take home.
Yeah. Yeah. After everything's all in, it's about that range right now.
So that's really excellent. So amazing job, by the way, and sweat
I,
equity too. So question for you is next is like, let's talk about the tenant side of this because we're talking about Section 8,
yeah.
talking about housing authorities. So you talked about building the relationship with the housing authority. You already went to them. You know what the rent's going to be. They told you in advance. So what happens next? How do you get this? Do you list this? How do you find tenants? How do you get this rented out?
Yeah, so our most common marketing tool is actually Facebook Marketplace. I thought that was really funny at first. I didn't, I've lived in major cities for a while now, but Facebook Marketplace is what works. We'll receive 60 to 100 requests to view a listing whenever it comes up. It's really really popular. I'm going to tell you, if you get into this, you might receive 60 to 100 requests. You know, 10 to 20 of them are real, to be clear too, that will actually fill out an application or make the appointment. So be really careful about how you do that. But we focused from the very beginning on building a relationship. When we talked to the housing authority from the beginning, we told them flat out, we're going to abide by every bit of the inspection process with you. We're going to make sure our units are maintained at the right level, and we're going to fix things correctly when we go about it. So what's great for us right now is we've built a relationship in the community to where if a tenant hears about our unit coming open, people are very interested already. And a lot of times we have referrals coming to us from other tenants
That's amazing.
because we fixed, it's really important to me that if we're going to support, an underprivileged part of the community, we do not leave them in a situation to where they're having a bad experience with the place they live. So much matters in the outcomes for someone's life based off the security of the home they have and the quality of life they have at home. This may be low income housing and it may not be the most profitable thing in the world for everybody if you don't do it right, but we can be a positive impact on the community because that's why you see so many signs on apartment rentals too, no HUD. Well, they don't want to have to abide by the rules that HUD will provide for them. And I love it because it makes my life easy. I know what the rules are. It's not hard either. Act
So
with some integrity in it. It works. Go ahead.
This is really important what you just said because I think this is it. This is the magic sauce right here. So I remember, I don't know if you read David Lindhall, Multifamily Millions, but I
Yeah.
remember reading that a couple of years ago, and one of the chapters talks about tenant relationships and not property management relationship, but tenant relationships. What's your like philosophy on tenant relationships? How do you respond to them? If you were the tenant, how would you want to be treated, right? And what you just said is really, I think, very, very useful to all of us to think about. So it sounds like you have a philosophy around tenant relationships. Uh, Does it seems like whether Section 8 or not, it seems like you're addressing the tenant needs up front and you're planning for it. Um, how do you actually ensure that you're able to execute on that? Like, what does it take? Is it the budgeting aspect? Is it the team
Yeah.
you have? Like, how do you actually make sure that you're giving the tenants a positive experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, some of it comes down to just from the get go. So I work in HR on a daily basis, and honestly, like that's customer service the same way that this is customer service at the same time, right? The number one thing that we tell people if they come to rent with us, we're not going to tell them they're going to love every decision we make. We're straightforward. We are going to tell them we're going to be consistent to them. We're going to be fair, and we're going to treat them with respect. And we will do those three things at all times. It's like any job, and people love you if you're just that way, and you treat them with respect. It's not that hard to make that work. And honestly, people don't want the landlord who's constantly giving them all kinds of grace, and then they don't know what their real accountability is going to be at any time. They want somebody who's consistent with them, who tells them the rules so they can follow and have standards that they work with. I'm really fortunate too. I work with my family in this. My mom is actually one of our primary property managers that handles a lot of these units herself. She is a master at tenant relations. She just,
Okay.
people love her because she treats them with those three things, right? Like she gets it right. My wife is really involved in this too. She treats people with respect first. It's the same thing when I'm on the phone with somebody. If I have to deal with an issue, I'm going to walk over. The first thing I'm going to ask is how you're doing. I want to know how you are. What do you need? I'm going to ask what's causing an issue. And I don't start with, hey, what did you do that, or what did you not do for me in this process? And I think if you lead with that and you just remember that, hey, these people do provide you with an income, but it is not like the only thing they do. You lead with the fact that they're people. You got to remember those things with folks. We're all in this because we want to make an investment that is profitable, but we got to remember that there's somebody on the other end of this that depends on that housing situation that probably wants to do right. Not everybody is altruistic, right? But we got to believe that people in general are good,
That's
and that they're trying to do well.
I love that mindset. And so, sorry, you said consistent, respect. And there was one more thing you said.
And that you make decisions with it, that are fair, or
Yeah.
what I like to use integrity, right? Like you make decisions that you can feel good from an integrity perspective about. Like you're not cutting corners for somebody just so you can pocket a little money if it's going to create a bad experience for them. That's not a good business decision. You're going to have a bad reputation, and it really, I mean, it's common to see that, right?
Makes sense. So it sounds like you have a family sort of team set up. Have you used property managers before for folks that are using property managers? Can property managers find the Section 8 tenants? Like you said, they
Oh,
have listed on Facebook Marketplace and things like that.
yeah.
Is that common? Is that something that people are
They,
doing?
Absolutely can. Like I know tons of folks who use property managers for the same thing. In my individual market, a lot of them didn't do a lot of that like Section 8 support. So the reason we got into property management, and we have our own property management firm that's launching at the beginning of the year, because we specialize in this space, we wanted to add on that business. But a lot of them didn't do a lot of that. But I can guarantee you in your market, there's somebody who's extremely experienced about that.
Yeah.
Somebody knows that market extremely well. And I can't tell you how valuable it is to have experienced property management from the start. They know how these things work and they're great at it for a reason.
Yeah, so that's helpful. So let me ask you a question. I mean, so why does it get a bad rap? Because I was talking to a property manager a month ago and just seeing if it might be a good fit for my portfolio. And I said, "Hey, do you do Section 8? Because I might be interested in diversifying and having a little bit more
Yeah.
stable rent in some of the areas that we're in, especially if they're like C neighborhoods and things like that." And it said right away, like, we don't do Section 8. And it was, there's a stigma to it. Like, what is the reason for the negativity? Are the tenants more difficult to deal with? Is it because of the HUD requirements? Like, why are people feeling like this is a hard thing to do?
So if I start with this and I think it really depends sometimes on your market. This is why I say get to know your housing authority, get to know the process, because different housing authorities operate in different ways. Yes, this may be a federally controlled program. Let me be abundantly clear. Your local housing authority will operate differently each by each one, right? So some of
Right.
that though, I think there's stigma here because people think that, hey, these people are going to tear up a unit, they're going to do something. And I think we have some of those bad misconceptions just because someone may be in a lower income bracket, that maybe they don't take care of things as well. That's not been my case. If I look at this end of it too, I probably have less issues. And I could go back and look at the data. I can guarantee you I have less issues with my Section 8 tenants than I might with any other tenant group. Because number one, too, they know that part of their ability to maintain their benefit is not violating lease terms, not causing major issues that could cause a rumble with their local housing authority because they're in control of that voucher they receive. So if I have a tenant who's consistently violating lease terms, the local housing authority wants to know.
That's
And
important.
so
That's an important one in terms of risk mitigation. So what's your recourse as the owner or property manager if the tenant is not, complying with the
yeah,
lease terms? And
so as
yeah, sorry.
if you have something else to add on, go ahead.
Yeah, that's one question. And the other one is just related to what are your responsibilities as the owner from the HUD perspective that you have
Yeah,
to maintain, what inspection related or whatever that is.
yeah.
It sounds like it's a little bit different than the typical rental unit. Maybe I'm purely asking because I don't know.
It's Well, let's run through some things first. So let's quickly run through like if I have a tenant who doesn't pay rent, the eviction process is not different. The only difference is I'm probably still going to receive that Section 8 portion for the month until I have to evict a tenant. But if that tenant has not done this and they haven't worked with the housing authority and they, fall on bad terms with that end, technically the housing authority, right or wrong, can sometimes void their benefits in process. Let's say they destroy my unit due to inappropriate behavior, they violate lease terms there too. The local housing authority, I've watched it, right or wrong, again, if they have like major destruction in a unit, the housing authority has the ability to terminate that person's benefits in that area. And what I've seen historically is they don't have a very easy path to ever getting those benefits back. So
Okay.
it's a big impact for the tenant
So
if
you
they
can,
if they don't.
so you can report back
Yeah.
and they could lose their voucher and that could prevent them from getting the same benefit somewhere else.
Well, at least in that same local housing authority. Let's say, if they go apply to a different one, it depends on how well they communicate with each other too. But in that housing authority, that's the way we've seen it play out in the past. It's very, very rare though. And I want to remind folks too, a lot of my tenants who are on housing assistance are elderly tenants
Hmm,
who probably are living on a fixed income. That's a huge portion of my tenant base, and they need assistance to be able to live well. Again, that's just another, people think about this, it's not a common issue for those tenants. So it's very, very rare that we run into problems at all.
got it. And another question related to this is what percentage of the rent comes from the how I know it could vary based on the individual, right?
Yeah.
So typically what percentage is getting covered by the voucher versus what they are paying out of pocket as a tenant?
On average, and this is kind of a swag and process for you too, but it's roughly 50%. But I have tenants as low as probably getting 30% assistance from the housing authority, all the way up to 95, almost 100% for some of them,
Okay.
depending on the need that they have. It's pretty rare to see above 70, but the majority of my tenants are somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of their assistance comes from the housing authority.
Okay. That's helpful. And then how do you collect just more tactically, how do you collect the rent for the rest of the that's due from the tenant directly?
Yeah. So we use, we just collect it the way we would anybody else's. So the tenant knows their prorated portion. So Section 8 has a portion of the lease that states the portion that Section 8 will pay. And it's on our leases that we have. And there's a form that's stapled to the front of it once it's approved. This is the portion that Section 8 pays. Section 8 pays me sometime in between the first and fifth every month. And then the tenant has a prorated portion they have to pay by the fifth, which is the grace period. We say it's on the first, but in
Hmm,
Arkansas, specifically, we look at that state, they have the fifth as a grace period that we've allowed as part of the lease. They're still subject to the same late fees if they pay late. There's no difference there. They're still responsible for a late fee on their portion, whatever we decide in that end that's consistent from our leasing basis.
understood. And so now shifting gears a little bit, going towards the housing authority, what are
Yeah.
your obligations there? Are we dealing with what annual inspections? Are there other
Yeah.
things you have to meet? What are the requirements?
So annual inspections are really common. I'll tell you one of the quirky examples that we have though that can be a little bit weird for folks is The inspections are sort of standardized across the US, but it doesn't mean they are. And your inspectors will handle things differently. So I'll give you an example in my local area. One of the requirements is that you provide the tenant with adequate cupboard space. And another requirement is you provide them with adequate refrigeration space.
Okay.
If you can tell me what adequate means on a consistent basis, that would be wonderful. I've actually asked them and we laughed about it because they said, well, it seems like whatever's going to be enough for the size of individuals in the family.
Mhm.
But that means that at one point, technically, if they wanted to come back on it, well, if a family of four moved into a unit that a single person lived in before, does that mean I need to change the size of my refrigerator to accommodate them, or do I just need to have it always be large enough for what would be for a family of four or five? It can be a little variable. I just generally like to make sure that we're present for inspections, that we show up, we ask questions, and then we try to get to resolution as fast as possible. What's great is, though, is that the housing authority probably deals with landlords who don't want to do these fixes on a consistent basis, who fight them. If you're willing to work with them, you show positivity, and that you actually ask questions, they embrace you because you're trying to help them do their job at the same time. And they're willing to work with you on these things. It's very clear, though, the remediation timeline when you get an inspection and there's something that needs fixed, it's very, very clear how long you have to fix it, when you have to show proof by, and when the new inspection is going to be. And often, if we time it, our housing authority, for one of the counties we operate in especially, likes to do leases at the same time. Sometimes they request, and if the tenant agrees, we go ahead and update and do a brand new lease every time they do an inspection now too.
That's helpful. Understood. So I got one or two more questions, and we'll open
Yep.
up to more questions from the audience. Just in terms of the investments, and talking about scale. So you've scaled your portfolio. You've got 50% Section 8. So what's been kind of the secrets to success to getting it to scale? Like how have you achieved that? Did you raise money? Is it your funds that you just kind of rinse and repeating? How are you able to get the growth that you got?
Yeah, so I mean, we set a really good standard on cash returns right from the beginning, and we tried to make sure that when we were buying, we had a really good understanding of how much upfront capital was going to be required, not just for down payment, but immediate repairs. I do have two partners that work with me on a majority of these units. They're both great buddies of mine, and they've invested with me throughout this. Really smart guys too, help me think in really unique ways about how we solve. But we've looked at cost controls consistently. When we first started, we had no ambition in trying to cover utilities for tenants, but right now that's an actual extra margin of around 30% of the utility cost. I get back an extra margin because I charge 200 extra for it. I get, it costs me 120 on average to take care of a unit. So we found these other ways that we can increase our margin and make sure we're taking care of costs. We focus on working as well with local vendors. I find that if you work with local vendors, you don't try to call the biggest contracting company in town. Just asking the question about, hey, is this the best deal you can do for me? We try to make sure we've used our size now too and consistent relationship with vendors so that we try to work in bulk pricing when we can too. And we take advantage of finding the right vendors who provide us with the right cost for the units we're going to do. And we try to do consistency, right? We serialized all of our appliance recently. We're doing a study right now on what appliances last the longest in the scenarios,
Okay.
what brand and model is working best for us, because we want to drive that margin and consistency. So it's a very repeatable process over and over and over again. I was fortunate that in my career I've done okay. So I had some money stuck back to get started. But now the business is fueling a lot of this itself. And it's taking care of a lot of this at the same time as we continue to grow. So when we're ready to grow, the cash flow of the business is fueling a lot of this, and none of us take distributions. That's an important part of this too. We pay for property management to ourselves, but other than that, there's no distributions from the business because we want to consistently reinvest so we can continue to scale.
Wow, that's amazing. And how long have you been doing this? I think we covered a little bit in the beginning, but what's the time period?
Yeah, so I mean, I say I'm relatively early in process. It feels like it was yesterday. We bought our first duplex in February of 2021. And I think it's important to know too that we're almost 3 years in now, but we chose a market that allowed us to scale quickly. We knew that scale was going to be the key to this business when we got to gross revenue, because we operate in a cheaper market, which means that you can buy units at the right price. You have to be very careful to do so, but that means that you can have cash flow, and you have to use that cash flow because I'm not in an appreciation market. So for
Right.
me, I have to either force appreciation through renovation, or I have to take cash flow because my appreciation number is never going to be San Francisco or Seattle or San Diego, right?
Really important.
It's
That's a really important investment thesis tip is like in this market, your play is more on the cash flow and the forced appreciation up front. So when you do the cash out refi, you got that cash in your pocket and you can reload for the next deal. That's
100%.
that's critical.
Because we don't bake in appreciation into our valuation at all. We bake in, so no property appreciation is part of our return on investment until we sell. Our cash on cash is purely based off the cash returned, and no, not based off valuation change at all in the property until we go to sell. So
That's
we have a target and we stick to it.
super helpful. So, do you also target a rent appreciation on Section 8? Are you
Yeah,
expecting
I do.
housing authorities to adjust that up? Do they give you guidance on that?
Yeah, I mean, they don't give me guidance right now. I think you have to look at the market trends over the last few years, and you can pull historical data if you want to, just by archived web pages. For my market, I try to be somewhat conservative and bake it in at 3%. I always like to be pleasantly surprised, right? And so if we've gone well above that over the last couple of years, but even if the market had stayed where it was when we first started this, we'd still be hitting the projections that we planned for the business. And so for us, it's been baking in 3% is great, but we look at that over a 6-year horizon. I look at year one as no return on investment. Years 2 through 6, we have a targeted return that we hope to average over those 5 years. And we bake in 3% appreciation across those 5 years. We didn't even bake it in the first year.
Excellent. So that's 3% rent appreciation growing year
Yeah,
over.
3% a year.
And then assuming you also have some modeling for your expenses because they usually also go up.
Yeah, we use it. Yeah, we use a model for the same thing. What I'm actually trying to do now, though, is to stop the kind of this approximate model. That's why we've looked at appliance costs. Why we've looked at consistent models, so I know exactly how much I'm going to spend. We use a model right now about age of appliance for choosing to repair versus replace. We're trying to build out our own data set because there's not a lot of data in this market, right? If we build out our own data set, we get big enough that I can fuel my decisions with the data that we have based off our individual market and the exact items we use. That's why consistency is so important. Even if I'm slightly off, it'll give me better data than I would if I was taking approximates from another website that is not in the same market as us.
Super powerful. So we've got a bunch of questions ready to go from the audience. So I'll read those out. Before we do that, I just want to highlight from Baselane, if you are going to be doing Section 8 or even regular rentals, you're going to get that check, the voucher program for Section 8 from the city or from the housing authority. You can still collect that rest of the rent that the tenant owes on Baselane. You can invite them, set up the lease, set up the late fees, and collect that rent automatically, charge the late fees automatically, and it's free today. So there's a couple of different questions. I want to try to group them together. And one of them, actually, we can probably quickly knock out is, does he have a full-time job or
Yeah.
So yes.
I very much do. Yeah. So I run field HR for over 4,800 employees and 190 locations for Equipment Share, which is a heavy equipment rental company. It is definitely a full-time job. I love it right now. I just moved to them. I had been with a different company prior to that. I love it. I didn't know if I was going to maybe go full-time at the same transition into real estate, but I got an offer that was just a lot of fun. I was out at branches earlier today visiting with folks for a new launch. And then here I am. Yeah. Full-time job.
Bring it all. There's a theme around here in the questions, and for those listening, go ahead and type in your questions. I'm gonna do my best to cover those in the next 5-6 minutes. So you're new, you just heard Cody, talking about how he got started and how to invest in Section 8. Cody, if somebody wants to get started, right? They want to get into Section 8. It doesn't really matter what city they're in, what state they're in. Where should they start? Like, what should they do? What are the first 3 things they should do?
First, if you know your know your market first. And it's like if you're going to choose to invest in a place, when you start that process of selecting your market, hopefully it's local for you because I think that helps to start. But make sure that you've gone to the local housing authority's website or gone to their office and asked for the landlord guide if they have one, or any specifics they can tell you about becoming a landlord with Section 8 in that area. I think it's super important. That helps a tremendous amount. Once you have that information and you've gotten the local market rents, you need to make sure that there are units that you can buy that will allow you to still, reach your investment goals. Everybody's investment goals are different, but that will provide you with the capital needed to make that investment a worthwhile investment. I think that's the 2 most important things. And then third, if you're not going to manage the property yourself, which is completely fair. I mean, I'm involved, but I don't manage everything alone. You want to make sure that you have a local property management service that is willing to work with you on this. that is knowledgeable, especially if at all possible, because their relationship could be the ticket for you finding so many more properties. They're going to know all the landlords in the area who also manage these properties or own them, and that may be a fuel, maybe fuel to the fire for you growing your portfolio when somebody's ready to sell.
Yeah, that makes sense. So good tips. So definitely connect with your local housing authority, figure out what kind of deals you're going to buy and make sure they work for you. So if you want to cash flow, you have to make sure you find the areas where those deals are going to cash flow. Some folks are asking, what is the process to finding deals? And, how do you look for these? Do you actually go and see the properties yourself when you are about to before you make an offer?
So generally, yes, I do my very best to. If you have, bird dogs or somebody out there spotting for you, driving for dollars, you name it, that's great too. I've made it a point, depending on the level of investment, to do so. Especially, but I use the inspection period as a process for that too. Now, I have a reputation in my area for when I write an offer, my offer is only going to change during inspection period for catastrophe related items. That's
Hmm.
just the way I've chosen to do this. I don't go through the process of nickel and diamond during an inspection. And in this type of market with like, low income housing, to be candid, you're not going to get to do the same level of scrutiny as you would on, a class B or class A property. So I go in with a pretty solid offer unless I find something really tough. But normally I go see all the units myself. I at least do an exterior walk myself. If I can be present for inspection days, I show up and I'm heavily involved. I was in a ceiling on a deal that fell through this summer, purely because I was in their attic because I wanted to see the quality of the roofing that was there. I wasn't happy, so I backed out of the deal, and that was a very rare occurrence.
Yeah,
But I was physically present, drove in to do it, and make sure we were present there.
that's helpful. So what are the different ways you're sourcing deals for these kinds of investments?
Yeah, really, we got started with a really great broker in our area. I mean, we found somebody that I knew had a phenomenal reputation. And I said, hey, I want to get into this. And I think at first they thought I was joking. They didn't take me very serious, but they partnered me up with an agent. And I said, great, we got this first deal. I did another one later, and we started building a relationship. And then, we started with on market properties. But then, when they had somebody who was interested in selling that they knew, it might come to me very quickly before it goes ever to the market. And yes, they may still be it all processed through a real estate brokerage, but it was to me before it ever hit the market, because I would get a text message or a phone call or an email that told me the details of this property. Am I interested before it ever hits market? Here's the list price. And often I was able to get back to them within 24 hours of whether I have a high interest or not. And so that starts funneling deals. I've also found some just by pulling prop stream data, to be candid too. Like,
Okay.
I paid for a prop stream data list. I drive my neighborhoods. I look and see, and I try to find out who owns something. And you never know. My best deal ever when we go to sell it, when I go to, I'm not, it wasn't the best because I had to put money in it for now. But when I go to sell it, it would be my best deal ever. Was found because I contacted somebody privately who owned the place, and they gave me the price that I couldn't believe they gave me. That was what they
I love
wanted, and
I love that
I mean,
example.
you never know.
You have to get out there and figure it out. There are options available. You can go to a broker, you can go to a real estate agent,
Absolutely.
you can go to wholesale, you can go find it yourself. Go look on Zillow, go look on Facebook, tell people you're looking for a deal. But also you have to be ready. You got to have the cash
Yeah.
ready. You have to know your buy box. And when the deal comes, like you just said, you got to be able to pull the trigger quickly. Ideally, usually the good deals go within less than a day, you know?
Yeah, this 16 unit deal we have under contract right now is part of a portfolio. I have an agreement to buy another 14 units from them in the spring. But the one we have under contract right now was literally a guy selling his portfolio. It never hit the real estate market, but my maintenance guy does work for him too. So one of my maintenance guys does work for him too. He said he was going to sell all his stuff. I gave the guy a call. He was looking to retire, and we worked out a dollar amount that worked for all of us. Gave me confidence, and it was an off market thing, but it was just because I was involved in the community.
Exactly. You're out there, you're networking. That's so I've got a couple more questions, then I think we're going to wrap it up.
Sure.
So,
Whatever you want.
one of our previous webinars, we did talk about like we have started implementing notice to quit if somebody's late after the grace period in
Yeah.
certain units. What's your process? Like if they're late on day 6, 7, 8, what do you do?
So, some of this is a little bit dependent. I like to be really careful about how we handle this. If it is an anomaly for a tenant, I'm a little probably more lenient, whether I should be or not. But if it's a tenant who's been with me for a year and has never made a late payment, they still get a late fee. I'm consistent. Day 6 is a late fee no matter what.
Right.
Um, But generally, if we've run into a problem, we try to work with the tenant to say, hey, what is your timeline to pay? Is it something major that's happened to you? What's the issue? But we are pretty consistent that by day 10, if you don't have a set date that is guaranteed it's going to be paid and it's not by the 10th, we provide you with a notice of civil eviction, essentially, that we want to go through this civilly without having to get into courts. They
Okay.
then have 3 business days to vacate the premises. We don't take rent after that at all. So once I provide you with a notice, I'm no longer willing to negotiate. It's a consistent policy I have. So
Okay.
once we get to that point, I don't negotiate anymore. We provide them that notice and we move forward.
That's helpful. If you are doing Section 8, you knew the demand was there, the rents were there. Have you had an experience where the property just sits vacant? It doesn't get filled for whatever reason? And if that happens, what do you do in that case?
I have issues with that more so in my non Section 8 items where I'm probably a little bit over market for what I need out of the property.
Okay.
In Section 8, I really haven't ran into much of a demand issue yet. The housing authorities can pause new voucher issues, though. So just be aware, like they can pause that. They can put little pauses on things. But generally, the amount of people who have vouchers in hand will still be greater than what was available in the marketplace. So it's not a big problem.
Okay.
But I haven't ran into a lot of issues there where if it's a Section 8 marketable property, we don't have a list of people who are very interested very quickly. Most of the time, our turnaround is 7 to 14 days for an empty unit to have a new tenant in.
That's really fast. And so last question of the day, and this has been great. You talk about appliances, but what finishes do you put, in the kitchen, countertops? What brand of appliance or type of appliance are you putting in?
So yeah, and if I'll start flooring, we do LVP for almost everything. We use some of the standard. I think it's Shaw flooring that we use from Lowe's pretty consistently.
Okay.
I buy a gray flooring because I think it looks pretty good and it's consistent in our units. We paint everything that same agreeable gray that everyone is so used to at this point in time. But I like consistency and repeatable processes. When we look at like countertops, right now we do mostly the Formica composite countertops. I can't invest in granite and make it worth it just from a maintenance standpoint too. It's
Mhm.
not just the cost up front for granite; it's the maintenance that granite might require, and that is not a justified expense in my world.
Okay.
I'm heavy into using Whirlpool, Frigidaire, and GE appliances. I focus on electric appliances and try not to use gas stoves if I can help it at all. I like consistency again there. I like things running on electric. And for HVAC, if we have external units, that's a great thing. We actually do quite a few ductless installations now as well. I love the ductless installations too. But we also have found that a lot of times I think people might be scared of them, but the PTAC units that you might see in a hotel, those are frequently also in apartments.
Okay.
PTACs are my favorite. And there's a great company. I don't know if I'm allowed to give them a shout out, but it's called PTAC for Less. And they're out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And I order those PTACs by the pallet because the value you get on a PTAC unit, I can buy a PTAC unit that's refurbished for $500 and do a full unit replacement essentially for an apartment. And you consider that versus $6,000 for an apartment replacement exterior unit.
That's a big difference.
$500 you can replace a lot of times before you have to spend 6,000.
PTAC is the wall units, right? That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
it's like what you see at the base under a window. A lot of times you'll see them like that, and it's kind of like having a large wall unit. But they're honestly they do a good job. They're efficient as long as the building's efficient, and you can buy great quality brands with them too. I found that LG does a really good job with them, and we buy a lot of Whirlpool and Frigidaire units the same way.
Excellent. And so, Cody, thank you so much. If people
Of
want to get in
course.
touch with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my wife has a great thing started for us now. We're really new, but please follow us. We're called Mid South Modest. So that's Mid South Modest on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok in the same place. We do Finance Fridays videos. We post a lot about our personal house search that we're doing right now in Memphis, Tennessee, too. And we're going to start launching some deal deep dives where I walk through the entire underwriting process for deals on those same channels. You can find us there too. We'll have Mid South Modest Property Management if you're in any of that need in the Northeast Arkansas, potentially Tennessee and Missouri soon as well there. And so you can find me in any of those spots, or if you just look me up online, you're probably going to be able to find a Cody Brown that works for Equipment Share. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm happy to be reached out to. I love talking to people about this because I love helping people figure out their own path. Everybody's is a little different, but if we can be helpful to one another, it's such a great thing in the community.
Thank you so much. And we'll send out the information to everybody who registered for the webinar and for YouTube. We'll put that on in the description so they can connect with you. Cody, thank you so much. I took
Of
like a full
course.
page of notes myself because I've been looking into Section 8. So super, super helpful. And yeah, we'll love to have you back again to see how things are going, maybe, down the road. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Take care.